Hi, and welcome to The Building People, the show where we spotlight the career journeys and hard-won lessons of the people who keep Britain's buildings running. I'm Paul McCorkadale, I'm the CEO at GridEdge, and today I'm joined by Alice Hans, Client Sustainability Lead at JLL Property Management. Alice is a chartered environmentalist, fellow of the Royal Geographic Society, and who has built a reputation delivering ethical procurement strategy at Sir Robert McAlpine before moving to JLL, where she now leads sustainability for clients across their property management portfolio. Her career has taken her from embedding sustainability at project level all the way up to shaping a company's first ethical procurement strategy. And that ground level experience is exactly what makes her view of the built environment worth hearing. So welcome to the show, Alice. Great to have you on board.
Thank you, Paul. Lovely to be here. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's start, Alice. I mean, you started with an academic background in sustainable cities, and you've journeyed all the way to building JLL's first ethical procurement strategy. And I mean, that's kind of like textbook to boardroom, but also in between, there's a whole lot of reality and how you make that happen.
Yeah, so the ethical procurement strategy was McAlpine.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, just on that note. But yeah, I think my journey to where I am now is I did geography as an undergrad. I did it at Bristol, and it was quite an environmental sort of focused course, and that's where my, I guess, interest in sustainability as a career started. And then I was lucky enough to do some work experience in some interesting areas, including Lend-Lease, which really where I sort of got the bug, I suppose, for the built environment, and then went on to do a master's because I graduated initially in 2008, which wasn't the best year, to be honest. And so yeah, it took some time, went to do a master's, and then yeah, started working in construction at Sir Robert McAlpine, which I think if you said to me when I was 18 I'd be working in construction, that just wasn't a thought or an idea. And I think that just shows how, you often you have quite a limited perspective when you're younger. But yeah, I had 11 amazing years there, working there, starting, as you've said, off on projects, working with project teams on construction sites, and then moving into their procurement department as a sustainability professional, and then leading their sort of ethical and procurement side to things. So it was a journey, and yeah, and then to now to JLL, where I sort of, yeah, I kind of say I moved from construction into actually dealing with a standing asset and the buildings as they are, which is a really interesting progression and one I enjoy. And yeah, I've learned so much throughout that process, and hopefully you continue to and enjoying the sustainability journey.
So the piece on the ethical procurement piece, I mean, roughly when was that? So what sort of year are we talking there?
So it really started to take off with the introduction of the Modern Slavery Act in the UK in 2015, and that's when I think companies and I was working in construction then, so construction companies really started to, well, there was a legal reason that you had to, and that's often the case. You have, it's carrot and stick, and that was the stick in essence. Had to look at their supply chain and work with their supply chain to understand the risks that were there, and we're not just talking about tier one, but ultimately all the way through your supply chain, in terms of what risks are and how you combat that, and how you deal with that. And it's still very much, I would say, I don't work so much in that area at the moment, but from what I know and what I understand, the act, it was quite leading that the act came in 2015. I think now we're sort of 10, 11 years down the line. There still needs to be a strong focus on it, and I think we haven't seen as much. You would hope to, 10 years ago that this would have sped things up, but I think progress has been progress, but I don't think it's necessarily been at the speed that everyone would, who works in that area would wish to see. But I suppose that's always the case.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine when it was first caught up, or when you first did it in that piece, it was probably
Mm,
pretty, I'm going to say, one groundbreaking, but also probably at the time going, how on earth do we work that out? Because
yeah,
we've never been asked that question before. How do we
yeah,
actually figure that out? Was
yeah.
that the case? Was it kind of like trying to then work with everybody to try and get a picture of what was going on in that supply chain, which probably was
Mm,
pretty invisible, I'd imagine, in those days, like when we
yeah.
first tried to.
I mean, it's a huge challenge, and I mean, I love working with supply chains because often you have, there's some of these, they're global, and so the challenges that you face and the task is, when you think about it, it's enormous, but you have to break it down because it is so large. And, it's similar to what I talk about a lot today with, scope 3 emissions and companies trying to understand what their scope 3 emissions. It's a similar challenge in terms of the complexity and the size of it, because you are dealing with global and supply chains that are relatively opaque, and you don't really know what's out there. But I think going back to the sort of modern slavery and ethical procurement side, it was really about, there's always been, I would say, supply chain management and procurement, obviously departments in larger construction companies. It was the start of how we really started to work collaboratively with those supply chain partners to understand the complexities of the supply chain around sustainability and ethics, and work with them to sort of open that lid. It was, you companies have to make themselves quite vulnerable in a way, because you've really got to open up and talk about your risks, and I think, and understand that, when you start asking questions, start delving, you are likely to find things, and therefore you have to then deal with it. But it's probably things that perhaps they haven't dealt with before. So it was quite, I think, quite scary and still is for some companies. And it is easier to sort of pretend it's not there, but ignorance isn't an excuse, and it's certainly not an excuse in a court of law. So I always say it's better to be proactive and go out there and find it yourself if there's a problem, because then at least you are able to react to that situation in control. If someone else finds it and there's an expose or whatever, you are on the back foot and you lose control of that narrative, and you probably lose control of how you respond to it. So at least if you're going out there, doing the due diligence yourself, getting into your supply chain, you can control how you then respond, and hopefully respond in a way that's sustainable and less sort of knee-jerk and more lasting in terms of what you do. And you control that narrative as well, which is important.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never thought about it in the way you just described it there, which was, the
Mm.
company has to make themselves vulnerable and be
Yeah,
willing to be vulnerable to
yeah,
understand what they've got, and be willing to accept that whatever they find, they either have to tackle it or at least manage it in one way or
yeah,
another.
yeah. I think you look at it as if you find something, it's always been there.
Mm,
And in a way, lucky you found it rather than someone else did, because then you can respond to it appropriately and as you should. And I think it's better than you don't know. Now, that does take a while, and that's, you could argue quite a mature conversation to have, but it's about, with your supply chains and your supply chain partners, it's about generating that environment where they feel they can talk about those vulnerabilities and those risks openly without being penalized initially. And that all links into then how you vet your supply chain, how you reward them in terms of contract, because they have to feel that by opening up and not going backwards for 2 steps back, one step forward
yeah,
as such, but by kind of revealing that they're not initially going to get penalized, that they have the time and the space to then respond adequately and in a
mm,
way that is lasting as well.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you've been deep in this role for, over a decade. And what's the one thing that you wish that, people commissioning buildings understood better about what it takes to run them sustainably?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I think, there are so many, when you look at, I suppose, my career's gone through construction right to now working with buildings that are sort of standing and operating. When buildings are designed, they're designed for sort of 20, 25 years. And that sort of operational part of the building is the longest period, design and construction compared as, the smaller part. And there are so many stakeholders, right from design, procurement, construction through to operation, that are involved. And I think looking back on it, often those are very siloed, if you think about it. And understandably, it's the
Yeah,
way it sort of works. But if there's, it's taking that more holistic approach to it. For example, FM teams, and, they are the people that run those buildings. They are a key stakeholder, but often they're only, I suppose, getting the building and getting sort of information about the building at a relatively late stage, once it's sort of hit PC or it's handed over. And actually, as a key stakeholder for the majority of the life of that building, do you bring them in at a much earlier stage to try and get them even in design process, because they will be dealing with that building on a day-to-day basis in terms of the operation of it. And I think, and often their targets are often quite different to what you might have as targets as a construction elements. if you look at construction, often the targets around sustainability, around build on time, within budget, make sure it hits these sustainability objectives. It's not linked to often what is the sort of ongoing day-to-day operation of the building. You look at the FM teams, their targets might be around occupier comfort, sort of comfort complaints, that kind of thing. But those two need to merge, I think, more closely and be more connected. And it's not just giving FM teams sort of a complex system. Here you go, run that. It's really building in training and assistance to help them manage those buildings on a day-to-day basis. And I think you almost think of a building as a living being. It changes, it fluctuates day to day. And I think, therefore, building in the mechanisms where FM teams can appropriately sort of react to that. And, that's where things such as Grid Edge can really help in terms of having data and seeing it live and responding to it as sort of almost in real time, I think really helps. But yeah, I think going back, that stakeholder engagement piece, when do you bring those stakeholders in, making sure FM teams have appropriate training and resource to really manage those buildings and understand them, I think it is key to a building running successfully, and sustainability as well.
That journey you're describing, where these challenges are, and I totally get it that what you're talking about that each bit of the chain has their own objectives. It's really hard to join that up as the life cycle of a building from the point it was, idea to design to delivery. But I mean, on your experience, I mean, is there any maybe hard-won lesson that maybe stands out over time that you learned along the way of something not going very well that was maybe harder, more difficult, but you then had to go over that and learn from that? Is there maybe an example you could share with everybody?
I think so. I suppose, stepping back and looking at that, when you've got challenges, and I always think, and this is how I approach it. It's one way, but whatever that challenge is, even if you're dealing with data, and if you take a step back, 99% of the time, when you boil the challenge down to what it is, you're dealing with people, aren't you? And so I try and put people at the center of something, of that challenge. So how do you get the best out of the people that you're working with? And having that mindset is, well, how do they see it and what's in it for them? What's their objective possible? But it's really taking that people-centric approach and understanding what is it each stakeholder needs and what's in it for them, that I think really helps and solves whatever challenge you might have, whether it's a data challenge, it's a technology challenge, it's a health and safety challenge, quality, sustainability. For me, anyway, that is how I often start and look at issues and challenges.
There's often loads of focus on every other part, and then the people bit is kind of left to last. But I
Yeah,
mean, your career with that evolution, I mean,
I think what you're talking about there well, from what I've interpreted, is it's that companies and people have big aspirations and targets, and then there's the action, and there's often quite a big gap between aspiration and then what the action is to get there. Matrix. It's really important to be transparent and open about what you're trying to achieve. It's important to manage those expectations. I'm talking about, if you're talking to a client, what is it, how you want to be perceived? Do you want to be a leader? Do you want to be a follower? Both of which are fine, but it's understanding what that objective is. And I think once you know those things and you create that and you're transparent, you can then start to build a roadmap in terms of what that might look like with your client or your supply chain or whoever it is at that time. And therefore, whatever that roadmap gets to, so whatever that sort of maybe end target is, they've been part of that on the way. So hopefully that gap between aspiration and action is then at least known, and it's been agreed along the way, and you're not getting into that situation where it's like, okay, that's our aspiration, that's what it takes to get there, what's the minimum we can do then? That's that often, and in construction it's similar, where you start to get value engineering, which you could argue isn't really value engineer. So it's managing that and building a roadmap, I suppose, where everyone's on board.
I mean, and on that, you talked about I'm sure lots of competing priorities, so easy to get distracted by, multiple stakeholders with multiple things. Is there anything that kind of always comes up, or is it very different in each situation?
Yeah, it can be quite different. I think, cost quality are key things that I think you've always got to remember in any conversation, any sustainability conversation, whether it's a product, a service, a journey. When you can't look at sustainability or an environmental issue in isolation, you've got to look at it in conjunction with cost of solving that problem or going for that challenge, and quality. So if you're a manufacturer, or you produce a product, or a service, if it's not a quality product or service, then people aren't going to buy it or purchase it, are they? So that still has to stay center stage of what you do, otherwise you won't have a business. Sustainability has got to, as we know, fit in with that, and it's a constant balancing act. But I think remembering that is key, and not simply looking at sustainability or an environmental product in isolation, I think. And that is, I'm a sustainability professional. I'm hugely passionate about it. But I think I learned this, particularly working in procurement, out of a sustainability team, in a procurement team, but as a sustainability person. It was hugely beneficial because I learned so much about the wider business that I was in. And I understood all the different constraints and challenges other people had, other job roles had. And it's a bit of a reality check. As I was still passionate about what I was doing, but it gave me that wider perspective of how the business operated, the challenges it had. And therefore, when you're going into having those conversations with clients or supply chain partners, you've got that there. So when you're speaking to a procurement person, a cost commercial person, or a quality or health and safety, you can be aware and show that you're aware of what their objectives and concerns might be from that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you've been involved in, some pretty cool buildings and environments and things over the years. And the way you're talking about that core of that business, you said about manufacturing, but does that often trump, so we often hear, the building's there for whatever the reason of the building, whatever that function is. And that's number one. If that isn't met, it's really hard to justify the rest of it. Do you find that, or are you seeing a change where there's a more willingness to do something different in the way that these things run to meet more sustainability goals or cost goals? Is that changing?
I think so, but it completely varies. It completely varies on the client and the type of business. And that's to be expected. But yes, there's definitely the desire by some companies and some clients to, to innovate and be the leaders. And I think, as I said earlier, you have leaders and you have followers, and that's fine. That's okay. And that's always going to be the case. But I think for a business very early on, it's quite important to establish what is it you want to be, or you're capable of being as well, and be honest with yourself. And it might be a follower. It might be that you're not leading the pack on something. Again, okay, I suppose, but you've got to be conscious of what's out there, what your competitors are doing. And I would say, again, I'm being very aware and conscious of something that could become a distinction for you. It could become a differentiator for you in terms of what you do, and whether it's ethical procurement, whether it's buildings that are far more sustainable than other people's, or running them. And if you want that to be a differentiator, then absolutely go for it. But for some, it might not be. And it might be we're going to watch what others do, and we're going to learn from that. And because they might not have the capabilities to innovate as much as other people. And so they will then, be a follower. But again, that's okay. But I think it's being honest with yourself, wherever you are in your business, what it is you are, what you want to achieve as well. But that can change.
Yeah. And that piece on the followers is, I hear lots of businesses that seem to think that they have to be the innovator, the person at the front. And I like what you were just saying there about that followers piece, because if you went back 10 years ago, wasn't a lot of people that moved this needle forward, but there is quite a number of companies and buildings and environments that have now done this.
Yeah.
And you must see it in your space where you kind of
Yeah.
go, we've done it 4 times. We've done it over here. We've done it over there. We've done it over there. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. Why don't you come over here and have a look at it? Just do what they're doing.
Yeah.
You're already 2 steps ahead.
Yeah. And that's one of the, huge, amazing things working for a business such as JLL. They're really, innovation is a key thing. Technology is a key thing. So it's really exciting seeing a business and being part of a business that does that and can put the resource and energy behind that. But, it's a huge global company, whereas, again, much smaller companies might not have the resource or the funds to do that. But I think then, as if you are a big sort of company that is doing that. It's about sharing that knowledge, and that again, JLL is very good at that, sharing that knowledge with the industry out there so that other people can learn from it, can see it, and can then kind of jump on the bandwagon and be part of it as well. So every company can find its niche and can find its part to play. And it's just when you do running with that and being part of that, I think. And if you do have something, I think this is where, again, I learned very much in working in the procurement world, especially if you see SMEs or really small companies really push the boat out with something. It's so important that they understand the reward for that, i.e., are they going to get, that can they get onto your supply chain? Can they pre-qualify? They're doing all the right things. They're hitting all the right matrix. They've got to see the benefit of doing that. And other people have got to see the benefit of the impact of not doing it as well. And if you do something and it helps you be a differentiator, you get selected for contracts, you get to pre-qualify more, you get onto frameworks, then that just positively reinforces that argument of going out there and, for example, with ethical procurement, delving into your supply chain, putting the money and resources behind, whether it's audits, whether it's going out and sort of asking key questions. And as long as supply chain partners can see the benefit of what they're doing, then that is key as well. It doesn't become just the tick box exercise then, essentially.
Yeah, and you mentioned the technology bit there. I mean, is there one thing that you would wish technology could help solve now that, if you had that magic wand, you go, give me one of these things that would make this a lot easier. Is there anything that would stand out for you that you think tech could really help with? Because there's lots of stuff out
Gosh.
there, but the challenge
Yeah.
is finding the right thing that solves the right problem.
Yeah. I think, we're such a data-driven society now, aren't we? And we have so much data, I think, which is amazing, and it helps us make informed decisions, quick decisions more quickly. I think that the challenge is still having something that can really pull data from all different aspects and tell us, what, and that can be, for anything, what we need to do with the building. And you see that to an element with grid edge, to be fair. Obviously, you're pulling in data from a BMS, from how the building operates, and giving recommendations as to how the FM team can tweak that. But I'm just thinking that, from a property perspective, data from all aspects of what we do. I think, any system that can synthesize that and pull that into a more concise and digestible manner, I think, is something that most people would enjoy and would see benefit in their job roles as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge. You said there's lots of data, and there
So
is,
much.
Yeah. It's like usually what you hear is, can we get some more data? And you kind of like, we've got lots of it already. What are we doing with it? What's it helping?
Yeah.
But
And I think breaking it down I think it can be quite intimidating.
yeah,
And so the key is to be able to break it down and make it digestible for people, depending on their job role, depending on the needs of what they need to deliver. And I think that's key. And companies that successfully do that will prosper.
but even with that, I suppose, all the work that you're trying to do is identify what can be done to make things better, and
Yeah.
where can you do that? Is there a point you see a little, I suppose, a sticking point at the moment in delivery? Is there a bit where delivery sort of breaks down and kind of almost gets a bit stuck, or?
Yeah, I think again it comes back to things like communication and understanding every different stakeholders' objectives and goals, and if those aren't connected or joined up or even just communicated, then I think that's where you can get, disjointed actions can happen, and or you don't see action, you don't see progress. So I think, yeah, it often comes down to, keep communication lines open, talk to all the relevant stakeholders that are involved, and keep that transparent as well, and also be flexible. I think, again, understandably, people can be, you set yourself on a path, can't you? And people can be wary to step off that path. But actually, if you are an innovator, a lot of the time, it isn't always going to work out, isn't it? So be prepared to be able to turn around and say, actually, this isn't working. We need to flex. We need to pivot. And being able to do that, and being not afraid to do that as well. I think that's key. And the world and technology and everything is moving so fast compared to 10 years ago. So I think that's even more important to recognize that perhaps something isn't working. Right, let's change track. Let's take a pause. evaluate and see whether we need, things need to change.
Yeah, I mean that must then generate sort of some difficult conversations. I mean, there must be points you said about that flexibility.
Yeah.
Is there any example cases you've got of, those hard conversations where somebody's got a really ambitious target and they're so stuck on that that
Mm,
you're having to have a conversation about, well, that's fine, but you're not even willing to change, or there's difficulty in changing this
yeah.
bit here to get there. Give us an example of that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, I think that that comes back to what we said earlier about that gap that can exist between sort of your aspiration, the target, and what actually action it takes to get there.
Yeah,
And there can be various. It can be cost that starts to escalate, that makes it unachievable for a company, completely understandably. It can be, we're seeing quite a lot of different legislation come in that, fantastic. But again, companies are having to be really quite agile in being able to respond to that as well. So I think those difficult conversations often are where that aspiration and the action to get to that aspiration, there's a gap and they don't quite meet. And so again, it's being very upfront and very honest about what that is. Cost is one of them, but the impact also about not doing it. And again, I think this is what we see with sustainability is that we are talking about often in sustainability, you're talking about goals that are set 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line.
yeah,
Now, the people that are in the jobs now, whoever you are, you're not probably going to be in that job when that target materializes.
yeah,
But especially the leaders, they need to set the path and set the sort of stance for that. But are they going to be in position to actually reap the rewards? Probably not, because just time goes 20 years down the line, you'll be doing something different. So
yeah,
it's a mindset change, isn't it? Around
yeah,
how, traditionally it's all about quarter results and, what's the next quarter looking like. So it's really being able to kind of change that mindset. And well, that's still important, obviously, but understanding that we need to we need to put things in place now that mean that we deliver targets in sort of 20 years time, but we might not be here to benefit from them, but
yeah.
that's okay, sort of thing. Someone else will. So I think it's a mindset thing, a behavioral thing, and that's one of the toughest challenges to get people to, on board with as well.
Everybody's looking for the big, silver bullet, or I've got to aim
Yeah,
for the
no.
big thing that's going to make a difference. I mean, you must see it lots of places where it
Yeah,
often comes up and you go, time and time again, if you just did this little thing, we would
yeah.
get somewhere. I mean, is there any one of those that spring to mind that you go, I've seen enough everywhere I go, where you just think, if we could just make that small change, we're moving on the right direction.
Yeah. Well, I think it's if you look at a building and how we manage our standing assets, and again, companies will have targets about net zero or reducing their utility consumption by X. I think when you look at those, you need some big capex projects, probably big funded projects to help get there in terms of equipment replacement or everything, but then you also need the small daily tweaks. And again, what we see with grid edge, isn't it, the daily tweaks where the on-site teams are tweaking very much the sort of set points or whatever it is to make sure that building is continually operating at something that where it's optimized and the most kind of sustainable operation mode it can be. So I think that's the big investment products, but also those
Yeah,
daily tweaks. And it's again having the mindset to be able to approach both of those, understand that you need both of those, um, and understand that there's a lot of resource that goes in behind that, and support both of those. I think that how you manage a standing asset in a building at the moment is some of the biggest sort of challenges that company leadership has around the different cost levels, the different mindset approaches, the different timescales as well. I think, it's key.
yeah. I like that bit where you said about tweaking, and I think
Yeah,
obviously some of our teams working together, and I remember teams talking about that, just that continual
yeah,
optimization, and it was described at one point, it was like the compound interest type thing. It was,
yeah,
you
yeah,
make that
yeah.
change,
I'll
a
stop.
small change on top, and a small change on top, and a small change on top. Before you know it, you're
Yeah,
having this really big impact.
yeah.
I heard that from one of the buildings that you were involved in before about that, continually just kind of tuning it, tuning it, tuning it.
And what's so good, sort of impactful about that is that the teams see the benefit of that as well. And I think that is key as well, because often, again, when you talk about sustainability, you're talking about targets. There's so much reporting now that's done on it, and requests from data from left, right, and center. And often it's quite a sort of linear, the requests go down the supply chain, down the different teams for data, and they never, it kind of disappears into the ether. Where's that gone? Well, it's gone somewhere very valid, and it's quite hard to understand if you're producing that data, well, what's it going to? Whereas, something where you're constantly tweaking, you can see the benefits of it on a day-to-day basis. Oh yeah, that's making our building operate much more efficiently. And so that's that positive reinforcement effect, isn't it? Where the people that are actually doing the role and the job see the benefit of it. They're probably not sustainability professionals by professional or even their interest, but if they see the benefit of doing that, then it's positive reinforcement in terms of what it achieves and the drive for it.
Yeah, I mean, you've had a great career so far, and I mean, I'm sure along the way you've had some really interesting people around you. Is there any mentors or people that you've just went to for advice that really shaped the way you think about how you go about doing this? Anybody that in your journey so far?
Yeah, I mean, I've been very lucky to have some fantastic people that I've worked with, and that I've sort of cross industry as well. And it's funny, I think as you go, you only on reflection sometimes do you realize that, don't you? Because
Yeah.
when you look back and you see, I think people that give you their time is amazing, and it doesn't, and so that's something that I always try and remember and give back, is just give someone time. If they want to talk to you, they ask questions, they want some advice, because I did that with people, and there's some brilliant people that have given me so much of their time and guidance and supported me and let me really sort of grow into the roles I was in. And there's a couple of people I can particularly so when I worked in my construction days when I was quite young, I was starting off in the working world, and even just the way they brought me into the team, sat me in the team, where I sat in the team, again, just it was so impactful in terms of how I learned off people as well. And I think one of the things as a sustainability professional, actually, that I really benefited from was I sit in a sustainability team now, and I've sat in sustainability teams before, which again I love, because you can really learn a lot sustainability wise from your colleagues. But I also went and sat in a procurement team as a sustainability person, so I wasn't with other sustainability people. I was in as part of that procurement team, and the benefit of that was, again, that wider business learning that I took and the people that I learned from, and I think that was invaluable as well. So there are various people that have been, and they've given me their time and their energy, which is key. And again, all I would say is, I would say my career hasn't been like vertical. I think you often think of you, especially when you're starting out, you think, okay, this is the career ladder, and you've got to start climbing it. I've very much taken lateral moves, which I would call lateral moves, but they've been the most beneficial and the most interesting, I would say, in terms of what I've learned and my experiences. And I think it's there, especially, as we see in today's world, the job market's changing so fast, just in terms of the skills that are going to be required, what's going to be required in 2, 5, 10 years time. It's going to be probably so different to what we're seeing now. And I think, therefore, be flexible, and while absolutely have a focus, have a goal, have a career path, but just be flexible to what maybe sits in the sidelines and what might be not ultimately obvious, but could emerge and might be an opportunity that you might not necessarily have thought of, but could be an amazing opportunity as well.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. You've had those people around you, and
Yeah.
yeah, it just made me. I had a person that taught me, well, say taught me, coached me many years ago, and I asked them to come in and do a little bit with one of my teams yesterday, and I was catching up with them afterwards, and it was funny. We were sat chatting, and they was explaining one of the conversations they had. I could just hear his words ringing in my ears from about 15 years ago when I was in my team's shoes, trying to learn this world of how do you make these things happen. And I think
Mm.
often the people around us don't realize the impact they have on your career.
Yeah.
And
No.
sometimes it's not the biggest thing. It can be the littlest of nuggets that makes the biggest of differences that they
Mm.
just share with you. They're open to sharing
Yeah.
that thing.
And I think it makes you, it builds your confidence, doesn't it? And as you said, I don't think you necessarily, until afterwards, until you have that moment
Yeah.
where you can look back, you're like, oh, that impact that person gave. Yeah, it's not at the time, very rarely at the time, because you're sort of in it and you're a part of it, aren't you? But I think when you look back and you have those moments where you might have little pauses or changes, then you really understand the impact that some people have had. And for me, it's been across all age spectrums or different people in very different career levels as well. And again, that's right. You don't just learn from the roles above you. You learn so much from everyone in an organization. And I think that's why reverse mentoring is really powerful as well,
Yeah.
because you learn so much from people who are perhaps just starting off in the organization or have come in and are sort of a few years, behind you in the kind of career ladder as well.
I heard that phrase for a little while, that reverse mentoring. That's,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, for those that don't know what that is, what is that for other people?
So you're paired up with someone who might be 5, 10 years. When I say behind you, I don't mean, but that's maybe
Yeah.
I could be reversed, but I could be paired up with someone who's just come out of school or just come out of uni. So they are, 15 years behind me in terms of starting their career. But yeah, I mean, gosh, you learn so much. You understand what's important to them, what their perspective on certain things is so valuable.
I love it. Yeah, I love you mentioned that because it's so often mentor is always thought of as the person that is getting up, is the person always gaining.
Mm,
And like you say, I mean, when you're trying to understand the generations coming through, a better way to be able to spend time with somebody who is coming through at that point, understands
mm,
that well, understands those drivers, you can learn, and it helps you to be a
yeah.
better, should develop, it help
Yeah.
more people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's especially, for something like sustainability, where it's growing and growing and growing, and so important to understand how other sort of age groups see it, view it. What are the key things to them on it? How do they interpret it? I think, yeah, it's really important, and yeah, you learn. You might even the language that you're using, or yeah, is key, and it really can help you. It can really help you, deliver a message. Uh, win an argument, or win a debate, or if you're doing a pitch going in, who's your audience, knowing your audience, how do you pitch correctly. So yeah, it all helps for those sort of things as well.
A few of them away there, Alice, but I'm just thinking, is there somebody starting this journey? If you were rewinding back to when you started
Yeah,
and you could give a bit of advice to
yeah,
that
yeah,
person, is there one thing that you would say
yeah,
to them, or is there something that's maybe coming up in the industry that's going to change that you go, look,
yeah,
this is going to happen, be aware of this, because if you get this right, you've nailed it, sort of thing?
yeah.
Or what would that one bit of advice be to somebody coming
I think, oh God, loads. I think trust your gut. Trust your gut. I know that sounds so simple, but yeah, trust your gut. And it's very rarely wrong, I would say. Well, in my experience anyway, your gut is often telling you something. And again, through experience, do you probably only learn that sort of thing, don't you? But I think, yeah, if you were starting out in any kind of industry, that's something I would say. Listen to what you're saying. Again, something that I've learned is the power of silence. And I mean that, I don't mean that in terms of not speaking up. Obviously that, but the power of silence, especially when if you're in a challenging circumstance, silence can be really powerful and really illuminate a situation to you in a helpful way. So even just a few seconds pause if you're having a challenging conversation with someone you don't agree with, just letting some silence lay there can be really impactful, and also just help you and take us pause, especially if it's quite an intense, there's a lot of debate, or you're not kind of having agreement. Think, silence can really help you kind of reset as well. So that's something I would say. I would also say that thing, yeah, I said earlier about a vision, have a goal, but just be really open to what might be kind of on the sidelines, hiding in the shadows in terms of career opportunities. So be flexible if you can, because if you said to me as an 18-year-old that I would end up, this would be my career path, I would never have thought it. And so I think that's really important as well, and take opportunities. And it is that age old thing, you do only learn something from your mistakes often, and that's okay. And that's okay, and those can often be the biggest learnings, because you do a lot of reflection then, and that is okay. And that's what I would say. But again, especially around sustainability, understand what makes people what if you're trying to win and put something forward, have a pitch or win a discussion or whatever, just try and understand what all those stakeholders you're dealing with, what's a priority to them, and how can you kind of shape your argument to address that and show them that it also hits their focus, their priority. It helps support them in the job that they're doing. It's not just a sustainability solution. It actually helps everybody in the job and the role that they do. So yeah, know your stakeholder and who you're talking to. Yeah.
What could they
No,
do?
absolutely. Yeah, if anyone's got any questions, please do reach out to me. JLL has got we're very active on all the platforms as well, such as LinkedIn. We often put a lot of and I'll put a lot of research out on there. So do engage with that. I think, if you're starting out in sustainability, just try and engage with as much. There's so much out there now, but and sustainability is such a huge topic. It's so much it covers. You can, again, I compare to when I was first starting out sort of 15, 20 years ago. You're trying to find a sustainability role. It was so hard. You had to read between the lines. Now, oh my gosh, it's in every industry, which is brilliant. But that can be quite overwhelming as well. So try and find out what your initial interests are, and then do as much reading up. There are lots of sort of groups or forums that you can join that do really, write so many interesting sort of papers or do podcasts. So yeah, engage with as much of that, I would say, as possible. But yeah, I'm happy to talk to anyone, because it's something I'm so very passionate about and I enjoy, and I think it's hugely important to looking after essentially the planet that we're living on. Yeah.
Yeah, and Alice, I mean, this has been fantastic. Really loved this conversation. You've
Yeah.
shared your journey and your wisdom with us today, and your commitment not just to the law, but to how buildings can be better
Mm,
and more ethical for the
mm.
future. It's inspiring. I really appreciate it. I mean, to all listeners, Alice has said it, but I encourage you to connect with her on LinkedIn, follow her work, get involved. Together we can all make a difference. Thank you again, Alice. Join us next time for another conversation, and we'll cover some other leaders in the building work. Until then, thanks, Alice. It's been great to have you. I'm Paul McCorksdale, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot.